Now, today we have with us two special former Yugoslav speakers to talk about the collapse of Yugoslavia, which began really 30 years ago this year, and football. Now, those subjects are strangely related because more than in any other political conflicts I can think of, the collapse of Yugoslavia is well explained by football. You had this country which had functioned more or less since 1918, since its foundation, where you had many nationalities, chief among them Serbs and Croats, which played sport very successfully. Former Yugoslavia was very good at football and at basketball. They were called the Brazilians of Europe in football. And there seemed to be a sense of Yugoslav patriotism, of togetherness. And then suddenly, in the late 80s, the country starts to fall apart. Now, our speakers today watched this close up, and in one case had a kind of starring role in one part of the collapse of Yugoslavia. With us are Zvonimir Boban, who was a wonderful Croatian footballer, now a wonderful Croatian speaker on football and many other things. Zvonimir played for the Yugoslav youth team that won the World Youth Cup in Chile in 1987. That team was a marvelous mix of great players, Serbian, Croatian, Montenegrin, Bosnian, I think Slovenian as well. And they were seen as, Yugoslavia was going to be the team of the 90s. And then there's a very famous football match between, I think, Dynamo Zagreb with Zvone playing and Red Star Belgrade, which collapses into fighting between police and Croatian fans. Zvone is in the middle of it. The country falls into this terrible war and later emerges with separate countries with their own football teams. Witnessing this as well as a Serbian by origin, now a Serbian American, is Branko Milanovic, our other speaker, who many of you will know is one of the world's most famous economists, an expert on inequality before inequality was sexy, whose most recent book is Capitalism Alone, which has had outstanding reviews from around the world. Branko, to his credit, is also a massive football fan and historian. Zvonimir Boban is also a historian. He did a history degree at the University of Zagreb. So we're going to discuss the subject today as football, but also as politics and from an historical point of view. How does football explain and illuminate the collapse of Yugoslavia? Zvonimir, we're going to start with you. You were born at the end of...
Hi, Simon.
He's disguised as Donate Albanese, but that is just his Zoom name. In real life, he's Zvonimir Boban.
Yes, it's a friend of mine. I'm not so, technically, let's say, aware of what's going on around. So sometimes my friends help me in this. So that wasn't so complicated to get Zoom.
You saw in the end it worked out. We had a lot of Zoom anxiety to deal with before.
Yes, it's fine.
So you were born in Croatia in the late 60s, then part of Yugoslavia. How did you, growing up in your family, view Yugoslavia and experience Yugoslavia as a child and a young man?
No, I had a beautiful childhood in one small place, and it was fantastic because, we've always been on the street, playing football, playing other sports, being together all the time, actually coming back to home at night or late night. So that's how we were living all a little bit in Yugoslavia. And that times, I believe, all around the place. And in that moments, you are not asking yourself in which country you are living. You just love your country, you respect your country, and you are living and you are happy because you are child. It's normal. Later, with adolescence, obviously, that then certain questions came. And first of all, it's about the freedom, and it's about the freedom of expression. Because why I wouldn't say what I think or what I feel, why I shouldn't say it, why somebody's forbidding to me to say it. But on the other hand, also, there have been a lot of positive things as well. And maybe later we will obviously touch it.
What things did you feel or your family feel you were not able to express?
And obviously, being Croats and hoping that we would have one day free Croatia, obviously that you could say it because that was Yugoslavia, it was regime. we have to remember Yugoslavia had a lot of good things. For example, if I think about two activities which mainly made myself, it's a sport and instructional education. Yugoslavian regime was pushing a lot in that direction because that was really something that they took care hugely in Yugoslavia. But you know, it's normally that you would like to be yourself until the end. And what we've been dreaming in my family, and even grandmothers, fathers, and it was about a free Croatia. So that's what we wanted to have, or at least to have possibility to express it in a normal, natural human way.
Branko, you've written similarly to what Zvonimir was just saying about the happiness of growing up in Yugoslavia, that you were happy there as a child. How did you see that with hindsight?
First, of course, I would like to thank actually you and Pamela for the invitation, and of course, Zvonimir for participation. I'm sure we would really
from my side
have a very nice discussion. First, I have to say that I'm, of course, older than Zvonimir, so our memories are a little bit different, because I think that naturally mine would be, even everything else being the same, would be more favorable, because the 60s and the 70s were actually fairly prosperous years in Yugoslavia. Of course, in the 70s, it was lots of foreign borrowing, which, of course, the country had to repay in the 1980s, which were much worse years. But, you know, when you are growing up and living there, you don't necessarily pay attention whether that's money which is being borrowed or not. You pay attention to how well you live. And as Zvonimir said, actually, I have memories, but that's from earlier, like from the 1960s, fairly happy childhood, you know. Obviously, we all tend a little bit to project in a maybe better colors, the childhood, because we are now old and look backwards, you know. Zvonimir is not old, but I'm old. But I did actually, as he said, actually, I was growing up in Belgrade. We played actually football every day, you know, when obviously in winter we didn't play football because it was cold. But, you know, every day we would play out for 4 hours. And obviously I was not that good. I was within my range, like average player. And that range was very low compared to Zvonimir's range. But we were playing. And now what he said about the politics, when I try to remember 1960s, it really didn't play much of a role at all. And we might come later when we talk about the breakup. One of the issues that I had with the breakup, which I think Zvonimir did not have, is that I grew up as a Yugoslav. So I really had to entirely change my identity. And this is, I think, a very difficult thing when you're like, whatever, 35 or 40, that you have to sort of reconsider who you are. So for me, that was one of the very difficult things about the breakup.
This is, I can really understand, because somebody practically lost his country and a little bit everything, if you want. And this is, we have to understand each other, because starting positions, they are not the same. But it's important to try to understand humanly each other. This is the only way that we can get better all together. And this is what's going on actually now. I would say this process of, let's say, socialization and understanding between our or Yugoslavian people or Yugoslavian countries, it's really getting better and better. Thanks God.
Zvonimir, how Yugoslav did you feel, for example, as a football fan? Were you a big fan of the Yugoslav football team?
I was. I was playing for Yugoslavia with all my forces, with all my, you know, proud, and, you know, that was my team. And so, you know, if I remember Chile, you know, it's one of the most beautiful moments in my career. You know, winning the World Cup under 20 is crazy. It's not a dream. It's much more than one dream. It's just amazing. And then scoring the final goal from the final penalty. You know, I was happy.
Yeah, Yugoslavia, West Germany goes to penalties, and Zvonimir scores the winning one.
You can sometimes, if you have a time, if you see how I was running there, it was clear how I was happy. You know, and so. You know, I would do everything for my teammates, for my friends, which we remained all our lives, you know, despite the political facts and historical tragedies, the war and everything. I believe that we, the sportsmen, we bared it down very, very well. So avoiding the subject in a very clever way and being friends, respecting each other in the field, on the field, because we played each other and we played together a lot of times. But I can't recall even one conflict between the sportsmen, even during the war, from ex-Yugoslavia countries, which I believe was very, very important fact even later in the pacification or in, even for these times now.
You say you carefully avoided subjects. By 1987, in this group of young men who came from all over Yugoslavia, was nationalism or regional feeling becoming an issue that was difficult to address?
1997. So
1987. The World Youth Cup.
You know, I didn't understand you very well about nationalism.
Well, you said you had in 1987 at the World Youth Cup in Chile, there were subjects you had to avoid to get on with it.
No, I said it later. I was thinking about after the war or during the wartime. In that moment, we've been sharing just the normal living, normal being friends and teammates. So we didn't have this as we didn't try to avoid it because they were obviously Serbians, but it was normal in Yugoslavia. I was Croat. There've been some people who felt always Yugoslavians. Yugoslavs like Branko did, which was also normal. A lot of times they've been from the mixed marriages. So, you know, we've been like one actually, without any problem there.
So we go forward 3 years to 1990, and there's this match between Dinamo Zagreb and Red Star Belgrade, so between the big Croatian and big Serbian team, which descends into violence. The police start hitting Croatian fans, and you famously intervene. You kick a policeman. This is all live on television. The whole country is watching. And for many people, it's the first time they see that the country could descend and collapse in a violent way, that the match sort of prefigures the collapse of Yugoslavia for many people who saw it. Maybe this is a feeling they had with
I don't know, Branko is economist, so I don't want to give historical judgments about why Yugoslavia, let's say, fell apart and why it doesn't exist anymore. But one of the major reasons, certainly Branko will explain it better than myself, it's certainly economic, because they haven't been one solution to keep us together, because we started to live very badly, and then all these divergences, all these differences came out. We all know that this is a historical fact, it's not my opinion. And then later we saw what happened, because the regime didn't want to accept the new way of living, or maybe the new idea of society. That was a problem. And yes, in that moment, you know, I tried to avoid all my life how much was possible to avoid this subject of 13 May 90, which was very important for Croatian history as well, because I wasn't alone there, but I had number 10 on my back, and I was a star, so instrumentalization was very strong about it. But I was one of the 1,000 youngsters who just did something for ideals. That was an act full of courage against regime for freedom. This is how we felt it, how we saw it, and nothing more. So, you know, that was, I was looking a little bit what was happening at the stadium. That was quite strong injustice, and so we reacted, and we had this fight with police, but you know, the same time after what I had with policemen, I entered in a dressing room of Red Star Belgrade players, which were all my friends, and saying, "No worries, you're gonna get your home in a normal way like always. No worries." And so difficult time, you know. Sometimes we can even miss the things. We can even be unhuman. This is sometimes can happen to everyone, I believe. But at least for myself, myself. I was always trying to do the things humanly, but also I had my ideals and my ideas. And these patriotic Croatian ideas that have been part of my life, of my family, of actually all my lifetime. So this is how I feel. And then I don't feel Croatian like a better people of others. I just feel them mine, nothing more.
Just one more thing about the 13th of May. It turned out that the policeman you kicked was not a Serbian at all. I think he was a Muslim. You later met the guy, I believe.
But this was an act against Serbians, you know. That was an act against regime for freedom. It's nothing to do with the Serbians, you know. The first boy that I had, the guy from Trebinje, Branko, know the place, originally from Trebinje, was a grandfather of my son. Was full Serbian guy, so I have no problem with that at all. It's just you have to divide the things between regime and freedom and between Croatian and Serbians. That for me was never questioned. It was against regime, our act. It wasn't against Serbians.
Branko, how did you experience that match? I guess I don't know if you were in Yugoslavia at the time, but what did you feel when you saw it?
No, actually, I was not in Yugoslavia, so I really don't remember. I remember, of course, reading about the match and what happened, but I have not seen the match. Like that, actually, I saw the final against Chile, I have to say, in 1987. I remember watching it in Belgrade. It was really dark at night. It was, I cannot remember, maybe 2 o'clock in the morning or something. So I remember that. But when I looked recently on Wikipedia, I didn't remember who was shooting the penalty kicks, but I was then really impressed that actually Boban not only shot the final penalty kick against Germany. As you know, Germany is very hard to beat in general in soccer, but particularly to win in penalty kicks is not easy. And moreover, he actually scored the only goal during the game, so the Yugoslav goal. So, but going to your question, no, I actually don't, I have not seen that match in 1990. I read about it. These are very difficult times, I have to say, and I am actually, maybe that's the first time even that I speak about this openly. I spoke with friends, but the breakup was very difficult for the reasons that I said before. And although I myself was not involved in any negative way, you know, I didn't lose any, you know, cousins, nobody was hurt, I don't know anybody actually who actually physically died or was, you know, killed or hurt. But the events had, the war went on, actually, the war in Croatia until 1995. And then there was the NATO bombing of Serbia in 1999. So it went on for 10 years, if you look at all of this, you know. And obviously these were very difficult 10 years, even for people who were not there. And actually, because I was, just one more point, you know, because I was writing fairly, how should I say, anti-Milosevic pieces in a newspaper, which was published then, my mother was not very keen for me to go back to Belgrade. So I didn't go actually from 91 to 95. Not that the regime would actually do something to me because I was not an important person, but you had, which was interesting, I think Boban probably would understand that, you had a diffuse violence. And actually many people who had never lived in regimes like that don't understand that. They believe that the violence is always centralized. But in reality, in 1990s in Serbia, the violence was diffused. In other words, you could be beaten up by somebody, not because somebody gave the order that they should beat you up. It's actually people who were basically vigilantes who would take the sort of role of imposing whatever they believed should be done. And that's why actually my mother was maybe rightly sort of worried that, you know, somebody can beat you up in the street. So that's what was.
And some of those people, some of those vigilantes you talk about were football hooligans.
Yeah, actually, I think, well, you know, I don't know exactly, but it is true that there was, of course, a link, and you have it in several books, of course, with people who were then Red Star supporters, and they became, I think it's a sort of a semi-criminal organization to some extent, because they were involved also with drugs and, you know, money laundering, whatever else, but also they gave people who were then fighting as paramilitary in both Croatia and Bosnia. So
yeah,
that was,
football fans on both sides went to the front.
yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Zvonimir, so the war starts, and many footballers who you know very well, teammates of yours, are on the other side. How did you experience that during the war, when your country is in this very bloody and devastating war against the neighbor? How was that for you?
Actually, no. When I was saying about this, how we've been capable to bear it down somehow and to avoid the subject, to just keep good relations. That's what we were doing during the wartime, and even a little bit later, when still all the situation was quite hot. So we would avoid it, and being and continue to be friends like before. We grew up together. We've been, we are human beings. We are normal people, and so the fact that my country has a certain political ideals and ideas and the view, and other one different, and even if they are in a war, this doesn't allow to me to not be friend with my friends from the other side. So, and this is how they behaved as well with me. I never felt somebody who would hate me because of I'm Croatian or something like that. This, what I said before, is very important, because sportsmen, I believe that we somehow show the way out of the hell, because we had a hell there. So, and our behavior was exemplary. It really was excellent, and I'm proud of that. I'm proud of that.
Then, as the war ends and Croatia becomes independent, Croatia starts its own football team for the first time in history, and it's incredibly good. Croatia is immediately successful. Then in 1998, you go to the World Cup, and Croatia, this new country, finishes third at the World Cup with you, I think, as captain. How much was the Croatian football team, a kind of symbol of the new nation, and how did you feel that, and how did politicians use that at the time?
Politicians always using us normal people for something. So, especially in a football national team, you can imagine. And if it's successful, even more, which is also their way of living and using the things, which is also normal. Come on. Look, we wanted to pay the price of our privilege to have a little bit everything, while our people were suffering the war, suffering the poorness and a lot of problems. So we got this responsibility towards the people. But I have to say that our 98 was built a lot in 87 in Chile. There we got the idea that we can compete with everyone. Prosneci, Šuker, myself, Jarni, other few, fundamental players of that team. We got their idea that we can compete with Germany, with Brazil, which we defeated before Germany. So complex of being a small football nation, very talented, Brazil in Europe, for us didn't exist anymore. So that was very, very important, crucial moment, I would say, now footballing growing. And then other fact was clear that we had something more like a passion for our people, this patriotism and this responsibility towards the people, our people who were suffering a lot in that year. So these two, let's say, additional moments were very, very important in our success in '98 in France.
Branko, you're such a big football fan that I met you in Kaliningrad at the last World Cup, where you were on a long World Cup visit with your family. How did you see 1998 as somebody who'd grown up being a Yugoslav football fan? Suddenly Croatia is third in the world.
Yeah, it's a good question, actually. I was in the World Cup in France as well. So I watched the Croatian game 3-0 against Germany. I remember quite well. I even remember the place where I was, actually, in France. And I think my sons also remember it. I have to say about that game is that growing up in Yugoslavia, there was always this complex of Germany. At least I had it, and my friends had it, that it was very difficult to beat Germany. You know, and I remember that game in the 1970s semifinal in the Euro Cup, where Yugoslavia was leading 2-0 against Germany in Belgrade. And basically, the first half was really a distraction of German team. Well, what happens in the second half? 2-1, then in the last minute of the, I think, second half, 2-2. In the overtime, Germany wins 3-2. So that was really an exemplar of the issues that we dealt with when we were growing up. And then we see that in 98, this Croatian team winning 3-0, which I don't think that any Yugoslav team, and actually even maybe afterwards even Croatian team, never won against Germany like 3-0. So that was really quite impressive. And even the semifinal with France, right, Boban, it was 2-1. That was very even. It could have gone the other way. So for me, what was actually interesting, and of course continued something that I will ask Zvonimir about also what happened in Russia with Croatia being number 2 and a finalist in the World Cup, is Croatian team was extremely successful in his generation and now in the current generation. And that's something which I find, you know, quite extraordinary, because when you compare that with other teams, there was a big difference. And it didn't seem to me like that to be the case really in the 1980s, 70s, 60s even. So something happened when maybe there was like several generations that were very good, maybe coaching was good, but definitely Croatia has an extremely good team. And as last point, people were noticing that in this last World Cup, after Uruguay, this was the smallest country that actually played in terms of population, that played in the finals. So that's quite extraordinary.
Why is this, Zvonimir? Why do you think that Croatia has been so extremely successful and more successful than Serbia since independence?
As I said to you, we defeated the complex, then one in 87, and then one special generation brought forward a lot of things, a lot of talent, a lot of passion. We've been extremely great teammates, you know. We had incredible friendship, and that sometimes just happens. And this creates a cult, and this creates also in successful generations some kind of burden that they have to bring differently than being just small and talented country. They have to do something more. So this is what we saw in Russia, and even Luka Modric, when he was the best player in the world, in his speech he was saying about that our generation inspired them to do something great. This is how it goes. Yugoslavia maybe didn't have a fortune to have these great results, so maybe other generation after would have done much more, because you know, in Yugoslavia altogether, you know, we had incredible generation, fantastic players. They've been maybe, let's say, unfortunate because they couldn't have, you know, left Yugoslavia until 28 years age. That was also, you know, this professionalism and being in a big European clubs younger, then helps you a lot in understanding professionalism and understanding how to keep 90 minutes and, you know, in the same rhythm. And this kind of thing Yugoslavians couldn't have lived because they couldn't have left Yugoslavia until 28. That was also, you know, big punishment, I would say, in a professional way speaking.
So Branko, you Serbian fans have been doomed to watch Croatia succeed in World Cups. Mm-hmm. In 1998, did you, as a fan, support Croatia? And in 2018, did you and other Serbians, you know, what was their attitude to Croatia as it was progressing to the final?
You know, I don't, 98, I honestly don't remember exactly the details, actually, who I was supporting. Actually, I remember that I was honestly supporting Brazil in 98. That was my team. And I was very, you know, in the final, I watched the final in Paris, and, you know, it was striking, actually, because I went to the stadium without knowing what happened to Ronaldo that evening. I had no idea. And I just could not believe how Brazil played. And of course, later I read what happened to Ronaldo and understood. Anyway, but 2018 in Russia, of course, I remember well because by accident, actually, I bought a ticket for the semifinal and watched Croatia-England. And I was basically about 50-50, maybe slightly in favor of more of Croatia. But as the game went on, of course, the Croatian team was much better. And I moved essentially being supporting Croatia winning against England. And even after the game, because I saw some Croatian fans who were actually in the same hotel where I was. So I said to them, well, congratulations and a few words. And, they cannot actually, if you say very little thing in our language, they cannot tell actually where you're from. So the guys asked me, so what part of Croatia are you from? I said, no, I'm actually from Belgrade. I said, oh, that's good. Dečki, you played very well. And anyway, so that was a very nice, I think, meeting. And definitely Croatian team was an excellent team. Now, talking of my friends, I think it's basically like what you see in the news when the Croatian team plays, or for example, when Djokovic plays and plays tennis. Generally speaking, I would say that people support the other, the neighborhood team. Actually, if you look, for example,
Yes.
on the internet and you see comments, they are actually supporting, for example, Croatia played France. I think they were generally in Serbia supporting Croatia. And so that was my impression also when talking to people.
So you said, sorry, in Croatia against France, Serbs support Croatia.
I would not say, I really don't know. I don't say it's 100%, but I would say
Majority,
probably majority. I would say majority, maybe 2-1, yeah.
And watching Croatia play in 2018, I feel that it is a team in the Yugoslav tradition, wonderful ball skills, a team that plays in small spaces. Do you feel that Croatia has inherited the way the Yugoslavs play football, Zvone?
We coming from that school of football. So the Yugoslavian Football Federation created a little bit of this kind of school of football, shooting very well, taking care a lot about the technical part of the game and technical skills, being always with the ball, let's say sharing the ball every moment, what they were saying to us all our lives. So what then later was the same way in a Croatian football as well. Is this what we inherited? Is normal, and so it's not that we started in the 90s to have just Croatian school of football. It's a new one, and it's completely something brand new. It wasn't like this. We had history with Yugoslavia, and that football history was glorious, I would say, and especially when we think about the schools of football in Yugoslavia, they've been really extremely good in what they were doing. So, and we learned there, and other ones learned from us later. So, continuation.
I have a feeling that both of you are being very kind and diplomatic during this conversation about how Serbs and Croats are fine with each other, etc. But this was a gruesome war. It's the worst war that we've had in Europe in 75 years. So coming out of that, where many people did lose people close to them, how have relations with the other side been? How is it as a Croatian to go to Belgrade or for a Serb to go to Zagreb now, with this history that everybody knows?
Branko goes, or?
Well, no, you can start, I can.
Yes, I'm living a little bit more Zagreb. I know it's already quite normal situation, I would say, when it's touristic season, a lot of Serbs is coming in Croatia on the sea. And our youngsters going to Belgrade to have a great nightlife, which Belgrade is very popular for that. And I believe that everything's getting better. Sometimes still there are some problems on the, let's say, on a higher political line, which is, it's very bad, I would say, but it's what it is. But people are living in a quite good good way. And, you know, we can and we shouldn't forget, because if not, will happen again, like we always saying. And it's important to know what happened. It's important to take lessons from that. But in the end, you know, we are very close people. We are speaking more or less same languages or language. And we are all trying just to have good relation between each other. And this is, I feel that in every part of the ex-Yugoslavia that I went the last few years, being in FIFA, I was visiting every football federation in ex-Yugoslavia and Balkan parts, and they're all a little bit striving for that, for normal life again between the people, even living in different countries. This is what we have to do.
I mean, Branko, how do you feel about that? I know Sarajevo is not in Croatia, not in Serbia. I was there a few years ago, and there are graveyards all over the center of town because they didn't have anywhere else to bury people. How do you feel as a Serb going to Croatia post-war?
Well, I went there first time after the war, I think in 2005 approximately. I cannot now remember exactly. Well, I felt actually okay. You know, it's not, well, first time when I went, you really are not sure exactly how things will pan out. But it was interesting that actually, as soon as you start talking to people, because as Zvonimir said, it's actually, we don't want to go into the discussion about the language, or that it's one or two, but you know, it's a fully understandable. So once you start talking, you basically are back. And I felt like I was back to in the 1980s, because I actually traveled to Zagreb quite a lot in 1980s. So the 20 years have passed, and it seemed to me you're back to where you were before. And people were, you know, I was there for conferences, and, you know, people were fine. You know, it's actually in the restaurants also, people are very nice. So I didn't have any problem. Actually, then went on a vacation. I went to Hvar actually, and I got married on Hvar in 1987. So, you know, that was also sort of a visit there. We have not, my wife and I have not been there since then. And it was okay. But I can also say that, you know, the scars do remain, and, you know, people go on vacation. Generally, everything works out well. But if there is like one or two incidents, then of course they are really reported in the newspapers. So the incidents become big, and normal events really are sort of obviously not reported. So, so I think the scars do remain still.
Zvonimir, you must see that in your restaurants. I believe you have a restaurant in central Zagreb. How do sort of former Yugoslavs from other republics, how do they come together there? What interactions do you see there?
I'm not working in a restaurant, actually. Yes, my family is in a restaurant, and what I know, and my brother and sister saying to me, there is, it's really no problem, you know. It's no, people coming, people making businesses, people working together. We are trading again a lot. We are no neighboring countries, so what we have to do, just move forward. Obviously, like Branko very well said, scars remain, and fine, but they have to become real scars, not open wounds.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
We're getting audience questions. Send in other questions if you have them through chat. I'm going to start with a question from Andrea Mili, who says, Zvonimir, do you feel that you are part of Balkan history, given that you had this role in the lead up to the war? Do you see yourself as part of history in that way?
Somehow we are all part of history. So every man, yes. Somehow, yes. Let's say that if I'm part of a social, sportive, mediatic history, yes, somehow, yes, I was. I can't deny it. Yes, I feel like this, you know. Even in the books in elementary school, they're reading about that fact, so I can't deny it. what I didn't want to become. It's a hero because I wasn't. You know, it was just a rebellious act, nothing more.
Why did you go on to study history after your career?
To understand a little bit of the world, and you know, and especially I wasn't so interested in let's say war history. It's more about anthropology, about human being behavior, about how we're reacting on a certain process in a society. This is what I was very interested in, and this is the reason why I started to study history. I wanted to study before that literature. Now then I switched, but after all these events, I decided to study history, monothematic history. Quite heavy, but it's what it is. Yes, monothematic. When we say it's just the history, let's say just the history. Sorry, it's a little bit. I'm using Italian. Monothematic. It's just the history because usually you can
do it with other things.
Yes, with other things, so history or I know art and history or whatever you want. So, but I had just history.
Branko, I'm going to give you a question from Mirjana Milutinovic about the role of football hooligans in Yugoslavia during the war. There's still an ultra-nationalist element among fans in Serbia. Are they there to stay, or is there any effort to get them out of the game?
Well, you know, I don't know. It's actually, you know, I was thinking when we were before the you know, our conversation, you know, there were some ideas, and of course, Boba knows that much better than I, of restarting some kind of whatever you want to call it, the league of the former republics, and actually, you know, having games being played again with relatively big teams rather than having really these very small leagues that we have now. But I think it would be very difficult for the reasons that, you know, the question raises, is that you would really have to have a massive police presence and attempts to stop violence. So, I mean, personally, as a football fan, I would have really liked to see these games taking place again. And actually many people would, and probably financially, it would be very good because obviously you would have full stadiums and not, you know, half-empty stadiums. I mean, obviously after Corona, not now. But politically and because of violence, I think it would not be that good. Although, on the other hand, there is a league in basketball, which is functioning, you know, with from time to time incidents of all kinds, but it's still going on. But maybe football would be more difficult, you know. So I don't know, because there is quite a lot of violence. You know, it's not only a Serbian problem, the violence in football. It's probably, you know, it's a much broader, you know, problem.
A question from Dario Brentin, who's an academic who studies Croatian football. For Zvonimir, why do you think that popular footballers and athletes in former Yugoslavia tend to be patriotic? They stick to the kind of political nationalist side. Very few of them oppose that. And for example, very few of them, I guess, are pan-Yugoslav in their politics. Why do you think that is, thinking about footballers?
Because I believe that also outside of Yugoslavia, there's still a lot of patriotic footballers who play for their country, and they are very proud to do it. When they sing their anthem, we can see how they happy are. So even in Italy, you know, they are super, super proud and patriotic when they play Azzurri, or Furia when they play in Spain. You can see the faces of Brazilians. But all the people will be looking at Yugoslavia because you've been having an idea about one country and one people, and you know, and so you're looking at us with a different eyes, I believe. And it's true that after the war, after what happened to us, that we had in this direction, we gave something more, in a sense of emotionally something more. Having this kind of proud to demonstrate that our value like a people is a high, and so we've been pushing a lot on this. But actually, it's happening all around the place. We just love our country. We respect our people. Where is the problem? I don't see this like negative things. I would say it would be opposite. This it would be different. In a love, I don't see nothing bad. If it's this, if becomes something ill, it becomes something strange. Then it's we can discuss it that it's really something not good. But as far as it's in love, as far as in respect of others, then it's fine to love all the country, all the people. I don't see the problem.
Just to follow up, I mean, I can see that you are a Croatian patriot and you felt this love of Croatia. There were other players of your generation who came from mixed marriages, who might have been happier in Yugoslavia, let's say, rather than having to choose sides.
Look, I know. This is I felt for these people, and we have to understand that they lost their country, like Branko lost his country, and I'm sorry for that. I'm very sorry, personally sorry. On the other hand, I'm happy that we have our country now. And this is all the question to put yourself in other shoes to understand the people, to spend your time to understand other people. It's all about respect. And I believe and with the maturity that we can have and we can demonstrate this respect. Obviously, we had a few guys in our Croatian team from mixed marriages. They decided to play Croatia, like for example Robert Prosinecki, who is the most famous one, respecting a lot Croatia, where he was born. Actually, he was born in Germany, but then he grew up in Croatia. But his mother is Serbian, beautiful lady. But Robbie decided to play in his father country, and then later, obviously, he was happy to have taken this decision, but it's a life. It's a life.
There's a question from Haki Kurtulus for both of you. You've both lived outside former Yugoslavia for most of your adult life, I think. Branko in the US, Zvonimir in Italy. How much part of your emotional landscape is former Yugoslavia now, and how much are you living emotionally in Italy and the US? Branko, why don't you go first?
Well, it's difficult to tell, the percentages. Obviously, I mean, I follow the developments. Actually, I travel very, frequently. As I mentioned, when you asked me the questions, like, for example, I was in Croatia like several years ago. Obviously, I go to Belgrade and Serbia like maybe 2 or 3 times a year. I have not gone now with the Corona, obviously. I have hard time moving from Washington to New York, So I do actually stay, well, it's not only that I stay in touch on a family level, because I don't have that much family there, but I actually have lots of friends and I'm interested in political developments. But certainly to some extent, your interest becomes a little bit less. I think maybe for Zvonimir it's easier because physically Italy is close to Croatia, so he can go there like, every second day if he wishes, it's so close. So then emotionally you become obviously also quite involved with what's happening in a country where you live, like the United States, particularly at the time right now. So yes, so I really don't know what percentages, and actually you can have, emotional involvement with more than one place,
Look, I adore Italy. I love Italy a lot. Like not so strongly, but I loved also Switzerland in some other way when I was living there for the last 4 years. While I'm working, I'm obviously living where I'm working. So I worked in Switzerland, I worked a lot in Italy, but when I don't have work, like now, in this moment, I'm free. So a little bit playing Bohemian, I live in Croatia. So I get back in Croatia, so I'm gonna live in Croatia. Then I don't know what will be next years. Let's see. But when I'm not working after my career, I always have lived Croatia. Even after my post-career, after my retirement, I was living 15 years Croatia.
We have a question from Ranko for Branko. Ranko says, let's go back to this economic issue that Zvonimir mentioned about the breakup of Yugoslavia. To what degree was it caused by economics? And he mentioned specifically inequality, on which you're a renowned expert.
Well, you know, it's obviously a difficult question. I think that there were reasons, economic reasons. You know, there were large gaps in income. Like if you look at Slovenia, which was always much more developed than anybody else, and then Croatia was number 2 and so forth. So there were large gaps. Ironically, the gaps of income actually increased under socialism, so that actually the gaps between different republics became greater. And there was a general, how should I say, these general claims from all sides that they are being somehow exploited by the other side. And, you know, I see that little bit, and Simon knows that because we met last time in Barcelona. I have to see that I see that little bit when I was in Catalonia for a year. It's essentially arguments which are economic arguments, but really in the background is a political argument. A political argument is actually, I want to be independent. And of course, I'm now going to find some reasons why the economic system that we have is somehow making me worse off. And we have that. Actually, I worked in Belgrade in those days in the 1980s. So actually we had the people who were specialists on each side to show that actually their republic is being made worse off by staying in the federation than it would have been otherwise. So I think that economic issues really were there. And then with increased unemployment after 1980, with inflation, with shortages, which started in 1980 because of the debt issue. So, you know, probably, you know, Boban remembers that too. We had a shortage, for example, of things like coffee, cooking oil, all the things that had to be imported actually were suddenly became not available. Then of course you had also shortage of gasoline, so you could actually drive only 1 day out of 2. So all of these things definitely kind of precipitated. I would not say that it was the only reason, because there are other reasons. Actually, Boban alluded to that. Actually, basically some people thought actually Croatia should be independent regardless, you know. But the economic reasons then essentially push you on that side. And I think that they did play an important role. And particularly the youth unemployment, for example, which I think is also related to this violence that we talked about among football fans. And Yugoslavia had very high youth unemployment in 1980s.
Last 2 questions, we're coming to the end. I'll merge one from Alice Popwell and Leif Pogorski. Zvonimir, do you sometimes wonder how much a Yugoslav football team could have achieved in the 1990s? You were banned from the European Championship 1992. It was won by the team that replaced you, Denmark. You had this incredible generation, including some Serbs. Do you have any kind of regrets as a footballer that you guys didn't play together in the 90s?
Would be nice now from this distance to see what we would have to do, but you know, I didn't think in that direction. You know, I tried to just move forward with my team, and so what we did, and actually maybe also there are the reasons why we've been so straight and strong, in just, you know, taking our new way, and we didn't think about it. But thinking about the talents, yes, we can imagine a lot of things. We could say certainly that in my generation, maybe the best talents in the world in that moment. So many incredible talents in you know, born a few years of this difference from 66 to 69 is something unbelievable, or 65, 69, let's say it like this, including Pixi Stojkovic, because I believe he's from 65. So yes, Yugoslavia could have achieved everything in footballing sense, but I'm super happy that Croatia did more. So obviously that I would be anyway happy. I won in the end with Yugoslavia World Cup under 20.
I'm going to ask you both one last brief question to wind up. You lived through this terrible time. we've come out of it at the other end. How do you look back? How did that episode mark your life? The dissolution of Yugoslavia, the war, and then independence. Zvonimir, you go first.
But you know, I don't want to delete the good things from my childhood. I played Yugoslavian league until I was 22 years old. I left from Yugoslavia to Milano, and I had a lot of friends. I still having friends from that country and in this life. So a lot of positive things, but we can't deny that wasn't a regime. So this is a crucial thing, and we have to say it, and we have to recognize it. And this is why a lot of people were dreaming about different world, about different society, about democracy. In the end, we got it through the bloody war, which is obviously shameful for all. But this happened. But as I said before, I had a lot of good memories, and I bring with myself good memories. I remembering also very bad memories as well. But we have to move forward in a peace, in a respect.
What about you, Branko?
Well, no, I agree. Actually, obviously, we have to move forward. Well, as I said before, you know, it was a very, very difficult period. I don't think actually it would ever, obviously it's not going to go away. It would stay. With hindsight, I actually think that the breakup now, when I look at it now, was a good outcome, in the sense that it basically then created or solved a list of problems which were really very difficult to solve under the conditions which existed at that time. When I was mentioning that mutual complaints about economics on all sides, that particular thing just totally disappeared, you know, because you cannot complain that your economic policy is dominated either, you know, by Belgrade or by Zagreb when you have two independent states. So, you know, some of these issues in that sense were solved. So, you know, basically, I think we have to take it now as a given. You know, 30 years have passed. It's a long time. It's more than one generation. So this is where we have to start going. You know, for history books or for other reasons, it's very good to actually to study. And of course, I'm a big fan of history as well, you know, like Zvonimir is. So we have to study that, but we cannot just live in history. We have to live in the present.
Thanks very much, both of you. I'm going to give everyone an opportunity to thank you in a moment. Welcome to Pandemonium U for those of you for the first time, and please come back on October 9th when we have Patrick Marnham talking about the French resistance and who killed Jean Moulin, the head of the French resistance. Do give to Give Directly. The link is in the chat. If you like the session, it goes to people in Africa we would hugely appreciate. And we have a tradition at Pandemonium U that we unmute everybody at the end, which Pamela will do in a moment, to thank our wonderful speakers who spent a lot of time, and in Zvonimir's case, a lot of technical ingenuity trying to make this happen. I hope that your Zoom expertise is going to pay off for the rest of your life. This is the panel I dreamed of since I met both of you in the last couple of years. I thought one day I'm going to organize this and we're going to have this conversation. So thanks very much, Branko Milanovic, Zvonimir Boban. Give them a big round of applause, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Ciao, Branko.
Hvala puno.
Ciao, tebi.
Okay.